James the Shadow Callaghan and Marco Silk Romano were names whispered in fear across Liverpool. Masters of the city's underground, they controlled the flow of drugs, money and secrets, until the night the law finally caught up with them. This is the story of the Liverpool Mafia's rise, their ruthless empire, and the dramatic sweep that brought even the most untouchable kingpins to their knees. Liverpool's docks had always been a place of constant movement. Container ships arrived and departed. Cranes swung heavy cargo into place, and the city's heartbeat pulsed along the River Mersey. But beneath the rhythm of legitimate commerce, a darker world thrived. In the shadows of the warehouses and the narrow alleyways behind the warehouses, a secretive criminal organization had grown stronger with every passing year. Locals called them the Liverpool Mafia, though the men who led it rarely left traces of their presence. Their faces were unknown, their routines invisible, and their reach extended into every corner of the city. For decades, law enforcement suspected they existed, but few had been able to identify the true scale of their operation. The network was sophisticated, more like a business empire than a gang. Every drug shipment, every illegal deal, every drop of contraband was meticulously planned. Cocaine, heroin, and synthetic drugs moved silently through Liverpool, often hidden among shipments of seafood, machinery, or even legitimate consumer goods. What made the organization particularly dangerous was its ability to blend into everyday life. Luxury cars lined ordinary streets. Seemingly innocent family-run businesses acted as fronts for laundering money. From the outside it looked like any other bustling part of the city, but insiders knew the truth. Each corner held secrets, each warehouse concealed illicit activities, and every quiet street could be a link in a sprawling criminal network. The Mafia's influence extended beyond mere commerce. Whispers in the community spoke of people who vanished without explanation, leaving families with nothing but questions. Some who tried to challenge the network ended up facing mysterious accidents or threats that forced them to abandon their homes. Locals learned early on that curiosity came at a cost. Even those who observed from a distance could sense the tension in the air, an invisible weight pressing down over neighborhoods that once felt safe. Detectives had spent years gathering fragmented pieces of the puzzle. Surveillance footage often showed ordinary streets and everyday people hiding the complex web of crime that moved like a shadow underneath the city. They learned to follow patterns, unusual shipments at odd hours, sudden spikes in luxury purchases, and shifts in the flow of money that didn't make sense on the surface. Informants provided tips, but trust was a scarce commodity. Many feared retaliation, and some vanished after revealing what little they knew. Each lead brought investigators closer to understanding the Mafia's structure, but also deeper into a dangerous game. Despite their caution, the Mafia had one weakness: their ambition. While they preferred secrecy, their desire for growth often led them to make mistakes. Investigators noticed that as the organization expanded, they became bolder. New members were recruited rapidly, communication lines grew more complex, and occasionally, someone overlooked the necessity of complete discretion. These small cracks in their otherwise impenetrable armor were the only opportunities for law enforcement to intervene. Over the years, the city had become accustomed to this undercurrent of crime. Some residents ignored it, choosing to focus on daily life, while others became quietly vigilant, learning to recognize signs of suspicious activity. The docks themselves were a constant reminder of the duality of Liverpool. Commerce and crime intertwined, one feeding the other in a delicate balance. And it was here, in the shadow of cranes and warehouses, that the stage was set for the biggest law enforcement operation the city had ever seen. For the first time, police were preparing to strike at the heart of an organization that had remained untouchable for years, and the events that would unfold would shake Liverpool to its core. Detectives soon realized that the Liverpool Mafia was far more cunning than anyone had imagined. At first glance, the network seemed straightforward. Shipments of drugs moved quietly through the city, and local distributors handled sales on the streets. But as investigators dug deeper, a complex web of operations began to emerge, one that stretched far beyond Liverpool itself. The organization was not just a group of criminals, it was a highly structured empire, with layers of hierarchy, specialized roles, and an intricate communication system designed to avoid detection. Every member had a task, every route was planned, and every shipment was accompanied by contingency plans in case of interference. Hidden safe houses dotted the city, often in neighborhoods that appeared completely ordinary. Abandoned warehouses, rented apartments, and even luxury homes with seemingly legitimate occupants concealed the movement of massive quantities of narcotics. Each location had its purpose. Some served as storage points, others as packaging centers, and a few as meeting spots for the kingpins themselves. Surveillance footage from these areas often showed nothing unusual: delivery vans arriving and leaving, residents entering and exiting buildings, but beneath the surface, millions of pounds worth of illegal drugs passed through every day. Investigators realized that catching the leaders would require understanding this invisible web, tracking patterns that were deliberately disguised and connecting pieces that at first seemed unrelated. Perhaps the most shocking discovery was the mafia's reach into the city's institutions. Informants hinted at corruption that stretched into local businesses, law enforcement, and even municipal offices. Bribes were common, with some city officials allegedly providing protection in exchange for payment. This level of influence made the investigation perilous. Detectives were acutely aware that not every lead could be trusted, and that the organization had insiders who could tip off their leaders at a moment's notice. Each step forward in the investigation required extreme caution, and mistakes could cost lives. Encrypted phones and coded messages became a central focus. The network relied heavily on technology to coordinate activities. Every phone call, text, or email was encrypted, often using codes that seemed meaningless until patterns were identified. Analysts spent countless hours decoding messages, piecing together the flow of shipments, payments, and meetings. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it revealed the staggering scale of the operation. Investigators discovered that shipments were timed down to the hour, often coordinated with cargo schedules at the docks. Drivers were briefed in advance, but rarely knew the full scope of the network. Everything was compartmentalized, designed to ensure that if one member was caught, the entire operation would not collapse. Even more surprising were the mafia's methods for handling internal threats. Any member suspected of betrayal or incompetence faced immediate removal from the organization, sometimes violently. This ruthlessness ensured loyalty, but also created tension within the ranks. Detectives realized that by applying pressure strategically, they could exploit internal fear, encouraging members to provide information in exchange for protection. It was a delicate balance. Too much force could provoke retaliation, while too little would allow the network to continue operating. The deeper investigators went, the more they realized that the mafia's empire was larger than anyone had thought. Connections to other criminal organizations across Europe suggested that Liverpool was only one hub in an extensive international network. Money laundering, counterfeit operations, and hidden bank accounts extended across borders, and some shipments never even touched the city. They were routed elsewhere to avoid detection. The scale was staggering, and for the first time, authorities understood that taking down the kingpins would require coordination, precision, and a level of secrecy that matched the criminals themselves. As the investigation progressed, detectives felt the weight of the challenge ahead. Each lead brought new revelations, but also new risks. One wrong move could tip off the mafia and send the entire operation into hiding. Yet the possibility of dismantling an empire that had operated undetected for years provided the motivation they needed. For Liverpool, the stakes were high, and the city would soon witness a law enforcement effort unlike anything it had ever seen. After months of painstaking investigation, detectives began to see a path forward. The Liverpool Mafia was cunning, organized, and ruthless, but every criminal empire has weaknesses. The challenge was identifying them without alerting the kingpins. The operation, codenamed Neptune Strike, would require meticulous planning, coordination across multiple law enforcement units, and secrecy so tight that even minor leaks could jeopardize the entire effort. This was not just a raid. It was a carefully orchestrated strike designed to dismantle one of the most elusive criminal organizations the city had ever known. Investigators spent endless hours mapping the mafia's network. Every safe house, every vehicle, every person of interest was logged and analyzed. Surveillance teams worked around the clock, capturing images of meetings in parking lots, couriers transferring packages, and the discreet exchange of cash. Analysts cross-referenced bank accounts, phone records, and shipping manifests, slowly revealing a pattern in what had initially seemed like random activity. Each piece of data was critical. Missing even a single clue could allow the leaders to slip through the net. Undercover agents were deployed with extreme caution. They posed as delivery drivers, business partners, and even employees of legitimate front companies. Their goal was to gain trust without ever revealing their true identities. A dangerous game that left no room for error. These operatives infiltrated the organization just enough to confirm shipping routes and identify the key figures who coordinated the operation from the shadows. Every conversation, every transaction, and every encounter had to be documented and analyzed without raising suspicion. The pressure was enormous. One mistake could end the investigation or worse, put lives in immediate danger. Meanwhile, technology became a critical tool in the plan. Investigators used GPS trackers on vehicles, signal intercepts on encrypted phones, and surveillance drones over warehouses. Forensic accountants traced laundered money to shell companies, revealing a financial network that spanned multiple countries. Even the smallest discrepancies in shipping manifests were examined, often uncovering hidden compartments filled with narcotics. The effort required a combination of old-fashioned detective work and cutting-edge technology, proving that combating modern crime demanded both brains and patience. The key challenge, however, was timing. The mafia's leaders rarely appeared in person, and shipments were often coordinated at different locations to multiple locations simultaneously. Warehouses, safe houses, vehicles, and luxury residences. The goal was to catch the kingpins red-handed while preventing their escape. Coordination was critical, and teams practiced drills for weeks to ensure precision. Every officer, from the tactical units to the undercover agents, had to execute their role perfectly. Despite careful planning, tension in the operation room was high. Each phone call, every movement on the city map, felt like a potential signal that the mafia might discover the impending raid. Investigators constantly re-evaluated their strategy, ready to adapt to unexpected developments. Contingency plans were drawn for every conceivable scenario, from armed resistance to sudden flight attempts. The detectives knew that they were about to confront men who had evaded law enforcement for years and would not surrender without a fight. Perhaps the most daring aspect of the plan was the decision to exploit the organization's own weaknesses. Intelligence suggested that some lieutenants were growing restless, frustrated with the secrecy and constant fear of retaliation. Investigators planned to leverage these internal tensions, offering protection in exchange for cooperation. It was a risky move, but if successful, it could provide critical insight into the mafia's inner workings and ensure the capture of the leaders. As the night of the operation approached, the city remained unaware of the storm about to descend upon it. Every officer involved knew that this was a defining moment in Liverpool's fight against organized crime. For months, the detectives had prepared, studied, and waited. Now the moment had come to execute the plan and bring the shadows that had haunted the docks into the light, finally confronting a criminal empire that had operated undetected for far too long. The night of the operation arrived, shrouded in mist and darkness over Liverpool. The city's streets were quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if the docks themselves were holding their breath. For months, detectives and tactical units had planned every detail with surgical precision, but now the moment of truth had come. Every officer involved knew that this was a dangerous, high-stakes mission. The targets were cunning, well-armed, and unpredictable. Any misstep could allow the mafia leaders to vanish, slipping back into the shadows where they had operated for years. The sweep began just before dawn, when the city was still asleep. Teams moved silently through narrow alleyways and entered streets, their movements calculated to avoid detection. The first wave hit a series of warehouses linked to the shipment of narcotics. Inside one, investigators discovered hidden compartments containing kilos of cocaine and heroin, carefully packaged and labeled for distribution. It was a stark reminder of the scale of the operation. Shipments that had appeared ordinary to the casual observer were in fact part of a vast criminal network. Every crate, every box, told a story of careful planning, corruption, and hidden danger. Meanwhile, other units targeted luxury apartments and vehicles scattered across the city. Outside one high-rise, sleek cars lined the street, their owners completely unaware that law enforcement was closing in. Inside, investigators found documents and ledgers that revealed the inner workings of the mafia. Bank transfers, coded communications, and detailed records of drug shipments. It became clear that these kingpins had grown comfortable with their perceived invincibility. They had underestimated the determination and reach of the police. The arrests themselves were swift and decisive. Dozens of men and women connected to the organization were taken into custody. Some attempted to flee, but officers blocked every exit, leaving no room for escape. Tactical units moved through rooms with careful precision, ensuring the safety of both law enforcement personnel and civilians who lived nearby. The tension was palpable. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every sudden noise a potential ambush. Yet the meticulously planned operation left little room for error. And as the night progressed, it became clear that the network's leaders had finally been cornered. One of the most surprising moments came when detectives discovered an unexpected twist. Some of the mafia's trusted lieutenants had already begun to turn against their bosses, fearing lengthy prison sentences or retribution from law enforcement. They cooperated with officers, providing critical information that further strengthened the sweep. These betrayals, once carefully concealed, revealed vulnerabilities that had gone unnoticed for years. It was a dramatic reminder that even the most disciplined criminal organizations could fracture under pressure. As dawn approached, the scale of the operation became apparent. The docks, once humming with clandestine activity, were quiet. Safe houses were empty, and warehouses that had concealed illegal drugs for years were now sealed and secured by police. The streets of Liverpool began to awaken, unaware of the enormous law enforcement effort that had unfolded in the shadows. For the first time, the city had seen its most elusive criminals brought to heel, their empire shaken and exposed. Investigators catalogued every piece of evidence, carefully documenting the arrests and seizures. The magnitude of the operation was staggering. Tons of narcotics, cash, vehicles, and documents connected to an international criminal network had been confiscated. The arrest of the kingpins was not just a tactical victory, it was a symbolic one, signaling that no organization, no matter how secretive or well-connected, could operate above the law indefinitely. By the end of the night, the city had shifted. The docks, the warehouses, and the quiet streets had borne witness to the unraveling of a criminal empire. For Liverpool, it was a moment of relief and triumph, but also a sobering reminder. The shadows that had once covered the city were never far away. Though the mafia's leaders were behind bars, the investigation had revealed how deep their influence had been, and how easily such networks could grow in silence, right under the noses of those sworn to protect the city. The arrests of the Liverpool Mafia Kingpins marked the beginning of a new phase in the investigation. What had seemed like the end of a criminal chapter was only the start of unraveling an empire built over more than a decade. Evidence seized during the sweep revealed a level of sophistication that stunned even experienced detectives. Hidden ledgers detailed complex money laundering schemes, some spanning multiple countries. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and legitimate businesses had been used to funnel millions of pounds, disguising the true scale of the organization's operations. The city had seen part of the iceberg, but investigators knew the depths ran far deeper than anyone had imagined. Unexpectedly, the arrest triggered a domino effect within the criminal network. Some mid-level operatives, facing the reality of long prison sentences, chose to cooperate with authorities. They provided insight into previously unknown aspects of the organization, shipment routes, secret contacts, and even the identities of additional accomplices who had managed to remain hidden. These revelations allowed investigators to secure further warrants and broaden the investigation beyond Liverpool, targeting connections across Europe. The network's reach, once invisible, became increasingly exposed with each day that passed. One surprising twist came from the Mafia's own records. Digital evidence, painstakingly analyzed by forensic experts, revealed committings between the kingpins and seemingly untouchable figures in other cities. These messages exposed alliances with other criminal enterprises, suggesting that Liverpool was only one hub in a sprawling international network. Authorities realized that dismantling the city's operations could have ripple effects, disrupting drug supply chains far beyond the docks. The arrests were no longer just a local victory. They had the potential to strike a blow against organized crime on a much larger scale. As the investigation continued, the human cost of the empire became clearer. Families who had suffered at the hands of the Mafia began to find answers. Disappearances, threats, and unexplained incidents that had haunted neighborhoods for years were finally being addressed. Detectives documented the stories of those affected, ensuring that the investigation did not overlook the victims in the shadow of financial and logistical success. The operation's impact went beyond the seizure of drugs and cash. It restored a sense of justice to communities that had lived in fear for far too long. Despite the success, authorities remained vigilant. The arrests of the leaders did not erase the risk of remaining associates, attempting to rebuild the network. Intelligence teams continued to monitor known locations and communications, determined to prevent any resurgence. Analysts emphasize that organized crime evolves quickly, learning from failures and adapting strategies. The lesson was clear: dismantling an empire requires persistence, patience, and the continued vigilance of those committed to protecting the city. For Liverpool, the sweep became a defining moment. Streets once shadowed by illicit activity felt safer, at least temporarily. Residents returned to daily life with a renewed sense of security, unaware of the intricate operations that had been quietly orchestrated around them for years. Law enforcement, emboldened by their success, knew that the city's fight against organized crime was far from over, but the arrests had sent a clear message. No criminal network, no matter how powerful or secretive, was untouchable. In the end, the operation demonstrated the power of intelligence, planning, and perseverance. The Mafia's carefully constructed empire had been exposed, its leaders removed from power, and its operations disrupted at every level. The city of Liverpool had seen the shadows lifted, at least for now, revealing both the scale of the threat and the resilience of those dedicated to fighting it. The story of the Liverpool Mafia serves as a chilling reminder that organized crime can thrive quietly in plain sight, but also that with determination, even the most elusive networks can be brought to justice.